awesome question about, will there be a pug revealed to some of you newer people that are on the channel? Well, this is the first one. This is Daisy. She's a puppers. She's a panda. Look over there. Look, 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 look. Okay, over here. Over here, over here, over here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, thank you, thank you. She is a panda pug. She is about 8 months old now. And she is adorable, but entirely hyperactive. To the point of absolute insanity. Yeah, you're insane. You're insane. It's okay. Alright. Number 2? You done? You gonna wave at people or something? Hmm? 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 You sound like a ripe cantaloupe. Can you settle down? At all, please? Ow! Thank you. This is the big boy. Oh, jeez! This is the big boy. This is Connor. Connor is a male, and he is very confused as to why he's allowed in the office. Because if you ever see me pointing off camp, what are you doing? Oh, you just want scratches. Okay, I got it. Connor, he is not allowed in here very often, so he's kind of mystified as to why he's allowed in here right now. And he really likes scratches, so yeah, this is how we tranquilize a pug. This is how we tranquilize a pug. This is how we tranquilize a pug. He's happy. Oh, yep, there he is. Yep. He's happy. He's happy. He's happy. Okay, 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 okay. Okay, okay, go to mama. Go to mama and yell at me. Oh, great. Glitter. This is the last selection of the pugs. And this is Daddy's baby. What are you doing? See, I used to have her on the stream with me all the time. But then, she started getting real rambunctious and started trying to run and jump everywhere. Daisy's very upset right now because I don't have her in here. But this is Volcana. Or, as my wife likes to call her, Sassy. Or Monkey. Yes, monkey. Embrace monkey. Monkey. Kiss, kiss. No. No. Are you done? Are you done with being in front of the camera? You remember this, don't you? You remember this. This is where you used to show out when you were a puppy. When you were like this big instead of this big. But she's my baby. This is the other two are my wife's, this one's mine. She is my baby, yes. Yes. Oh, she's snarfling. What are you snarfling about? Do I need to build you a shelf so you can be in more videos now? Do I? Huh? Do you miss being in front of the camera and being able to show out and tap Daddy's hand? Huh? Huh? Okay. I'm going to take you back in with your sister so she stops freaking out, okay? Because she's a little bit angry right now. Alright. Anyhow, embrace monkey. It is episode 6 of the Skywatch. So, one of the things that I do not promote on these videos that I normally do is the Patreon. And the reason I don't do that is because he didn't monetize and neither do I. But soon one of the things that having the Patreon has allowed me to do is to get bark boxes for the pugs. And I'm going to be opening up another one pretty soon. And I put all that on Patreon. But with all that being said, episode 5 was a killer. It's what I was wondering how he was going to introduce ever so gently the concept of Space Marine boarding actions. Yeah, here we go, episode 6. I just got home from work. I haven't even taken my shoes off doing that now. Oh, that's cool. That is cool.
Heralds of the coming doom, by cry of raven, we are drawn. This oath of war and vengeance, on blade of exalted iron sworn, with blood-anointed swords aloft, advance we into dread's dark shade. Punishment divine unleashed with hate, a wrathful storm of bolt and blade. Purge with plasma, fist and shell, bring cleansing fire's righteous breath. For the Emperor, Knights of Caliban, the Lion's anointed angels of death.
Oh no. I got pug glitter all over me now.
Orion watched.
Alright, a truce has been called in World War III that happened in my kitchen. Moving right along.
The Steel Atlas burning in space. He heard its last desperate transmissions, sent some of his own, and discovered that they were incapable of receiving broadcasts, only transmitting them. His astropaths were likewise unable to find the minds of their kin aboard the ship. Their captain couldn't see them, didn't know how close help was to arriving. Company Captain Aurelian Tex was gritting his teeth, eyes bulging as he clutched his helmet in his hands. He was young. He had only seen a single century of combat, and it had been relatively unvaried combat at that. Mostly on the enemy's territory, mostly without having to protect Imperial citizens. And so he suffered this as a failure, watching the hololith display before them as it depicted the wrecked remains of the Universe-class mass conveyor. "It was a transport," he growled. "It was carrying survivors!"
Not anymore.
Captain, the chapter master said. "Do you feel nothing? Hundreds of thousands of people!" "Discipline," Orion repeated. This time he was heated, and the captain silenced himself. The first shred of wisdom he had shown in too long, the chapter master decided. He was talented, but wild, too swollen by victory, as his display had proven. Orion would do something about that soon, but for the moment he put such thoughts aside. For despite what Captain Tex believed, Orion did feel, and he felt a great deal. It had only taken them moments to encounter Xenos Empire upon entering the galaxy, and they had done as aliens do, leapt upon them when they perceived them to be weak.
Yeah.
It was disgusting.
Yeah.
How could it be that in a universe where biological diversity and permutations should have been nearly unlimited, it was the common trend that anything smarter than a Grox always attempted to eat, enslave, or destroy mankind wherever it was found? Disgusting. His abhorrence grew into something even deeper as a bright flash in the distance signaled the death of the Atlas of Steel. The captain, manning a mortally wounded ship, and otherwise helplessly watching as his crew and charges were abducted by the Xenos Raiders, had done the only courageous thing a man in his position could and should have done.
So this is telling the story from the side of the Imperium. I love this so far. It is... Yeah, here we go.
He had clearly instructed his tech priests to overload the warp reactors, destroying himself and a large portion of the alien fleet. All was silent as the crew watched with steel eyes and growing convictions as the Atlas of Steel shone like a star and then faded. Orion felt so much then. Pride in the unknown captain of that transport, in his dauntless pursuit of his duty and the safety of his crew. Sorrow for the loss of hundreds of thousands of refugees that had been in his care, who had placed their lives in his hands when he had come to evacuate their entire subsector from the gnashing maw of the great devourer. They had left everything behind, had watched their worlds burn from orbit in order to deny it from the Xenos, only to die in flame and void within this cruel new galaxy. But more than any of that, Orion felt rage kindle and spark within him, growing from the brooding fires that had sprouted before into a towering monument of his intolerance for the cruelty of the Xenos and their aberrant lives. He felt this combine with his other emotions, allowing them to stir into a storm within him, and yet he showed nothing, for he was a monument unto himself, carved by over 700 years of loss, pain, victory, death, and more than anything else, discipline. "Contact the Skyward," Orion said. All tensed, all knew the importance of that command, even if the details of what was about to transpire were beyond them. "Tell them Dark Command is a go. Also, contact the escort fleet and the unassociated strike cruisers. Tell them to prepare to burn for the dead center of the enemy fleet. On our mark," said the chapter master. "On our mark? Master, it almost sounds like you're going to..." Captain Tech started. "Prepare to charge. I want to hit them hard, fast, and once." At that, the room seemed to suddenly explode into a frenzy of actions and orders. Commands were hastily relayed by several crew members and officers, not just between the ships or to the members of the Skyward, but also across the battle barge itself. The captain seemed awed by the gesture, and it occurred to Orion that Aurelian had never once actually seen the Master of Light go into combat directly. Though the Skywatch had long been a fleet-based chapter of Space Marines, it was rare indeed that they became so cornered or driven to such desperation as to resort to calling upon a vessel as vast and potent as the battle barge they now rode within. "Get below deck, Captain," Orion ordered, and Aurelian seemed nearly crestfallen by the thought that he would not be able to witness the carnage the Master of Light was about to dispense. "You need to lead your men. I want to capture some of these ships, and I can't do that with macro cannons." That brought a vicious smile to the captain's face, and with a salute, he snapped on his helmet and departed at pace to the lower decks to prep his company, or those who would be needed anyway. The chapter master had just given him a privilege far greater than merely observing the retribution they were about to pay to the Xenos fleet.
In Star Wars, you get medals. In Warhammer 40k, you get to whoop that ass.
And his men would be a part of it. That was good for Orion as well, as it would mean that his third company and their new captain would be busy while the rest of the chapter went about securing the future of mankind from the most insidious of clutches, its own. The Skywatch were descended from the proud Ultramarines, and while they served their emperor in the farthest reaches of his empire, away even from their beloved 500 worlds, they were still studiously trained in the arts, methods, and patterns of statescraft, debate, bureaucracy, and politics. Orion had lost count of how many times he and his chapter had been forced to utterly dismantle the decaying power structure of a high world or even a whole subsector after having saved said system from the throes of heresy and treachery. But what he faced now was not a mere reorganization of an irredeemably corrupt societal structure, but rather the creation of an entirely new structure for an entirely new galaxy. He had not been idle in his weeks of warp travel, nor had his mind been consumed by purely martial pursuits. No, Orion had been drafting out all potential possibilities, outcomes, and likely dispositions amongst the fractious Imperial forces that now found themselves temporarily corralled under his command.
Okay, so one thing, if you're a Star Wars fan and you're watching this and you don't really understand what's going on right now, here's a little bit of background lore to kind of catch you up to where 40k fans would be at right now listening to this. Now, this chapter, a chapter is 1,000 Space Marines. And you've seen in episode 5 what they're capable of, and they're actually capable of a lot worse. But this chapter is a split off, a willing separation from another group of Space Marines. In this particular instance, every Space Marine chapter has a parent legion, and sometimes, they don't know who that legion is. It's been 10,000 years, so sometimes those records get lost, or sometimes it's just kept hidden. But this chapter, called the Skywatch, they are descendants of the Ultramarines. Each legion had a very particular niche that they filled, and the Ultramarines were administrators, logistics specialists. Their Primarch actually, wrote the book literally on how Space Marine chapters should be organized, how logistics should be done, combat procedures, and things of that nature. When he wrote the book on that, he actually had a full manual on what to do in practically any situation in combat. Like legitimately every single situation that he could possibly think of, he put forth solutions for problems that would occur in the course of combat. Now, that might sound ridiculous, but that's actually what happened. There's a meme among 40K people that the Codex does not support this action. And what that means is the book that the Ultramarines Primarch wrote, for some reason, doesn't cover what's going on at this point. And so that's why it's a meme. The Codex does not support this action. So if you read that in the comment sections, that's what's going on. Anyhow, shutting up, moving on.
Soon enough, this temporary state would end, and the disjointed parts of the Imperium which he had brought with him, forged together by the emergency of the circumstance, would soon seek to separate once more, either to pursue their own goals, or simply to preserve their own power. And yet Orion knew too well that this was impossible. They were not the Imperium of man, not out here. Normally, the disjointed forces of mankind could separate and survive due to how utterly massive the Imperium which contained them was. But this was not the case in this new galaxy, and yet the nature of man would still pull them apart if nothing was done. It had been bad enough when the orders had come to abandon their defense of Calistan from the predations of the Hive fleets. There, nearly 4,000 Space Marines had gathered already, having been warned by prophecy and less scrupulous allies
Eldar.
of the coming threat. 3 whole chapters and their mighty fleets had assembled in addition to individual squads from other, more distant Astartes forces. High Command, unusually competent, had sent many regiments from several varied systems to back them, and even the Imperial Navy of Battlefleet Zektek had been there to provide full support in both transportation and firepower. And yet, their Primarch father, Rabute Gilliman, had looked upon the projected losses to their combined forces, their expected earnings of their winnings, and had judged the scales overbalanced and not in their favor. So it was that Orion had to contend with the haughty demands of High Marshal Xanathane Rektan, the indiscernible considerations of the Council of Tempered Minds, as well as the abject insubordination and defiance of the Crimson Razor's chapter master, as well as virtually all Adeptus Mechanicus personnel with even a shred of legitimacy to their power. As it was, the various personalities and power structures present, which may have survived each other within the greater context of the Imperium, were now poised to become a recipe for complete disaster, both for them and the men and women in their care. This was all too clear to Orion, and not just as a chapter master charged with the training, leading, and care of 1,000 of the Emperor's finest warriors, not just as an ultramarine trained and practiced in the realms of state and leadership, not just as a former veteran of the Death Watch, where cooperation among disjointed halves was the key to survival. It was clear to him as a man, an old man, who had known many others of his kind.
Okay, so if you don't know what the Death Watch is, the Death Watch is it's SEAL Team 6 of the Space Marines. If SEAL Team 6 was SEAL Team 6th, you know, basically take the Navy SEALs, take SEAL Team 6, then take a bunch of those SEAL Team 6 and form a SEAL Team 6 out of that. And then do that again. So basically, the elite of the elite. But sometimes they're recruited for different means, but they work. It's ridiculous.
But recipes could be altered, ingredients added, ingredients removed. And thus it came down to his command to the Skyward, the most loyal and skilled warriors from within his chapter. Orion had not been idle for the weeks in warp travel. No, not idle at all. He had been referencing the Codex Astartes, the greatest single work of any of the Primarchs,
Bullshit.
and had begun the process of adapting it into a new work, a new structure, one which might save them all and forge them together into something stronger than their constituent halves. But it would all rely on the Tempered Hands and on the Lord Admiral Rolla. If both agreed to his method, then all others would be forced into place, their dispositions and ambitions be damned. But if he could only convince one, or worse yet, neither, he'd be lucky to split off peacefully. And that was the trick. As soon as this battle was concluded, he would need to address the situation. In fact, he was addressing it already. The gravity projectors whined with strain as the Master of Light, an ancient ship well over 10,000 years old, seemed to return to life after centuries of death-like dormancy. Despite the mastery of its technology, all aboard the ship felt the pull on the unnatural gravity which adhered to them. Even Orion, as the behemoth of a ship, launched itself like a loosed arrow through the void of space. It briefly outpaced even the escorts around it, though only briefly, as the smaller craft assembled around it, encapsulating the battle barge in a defensive formation, while others ranged even further ahead. They were like fleas around the Master of Light, being a mere average of 2 kilometers long compared to Orion's venerable battle barge, which stretched 12 kilometers long and nearly 5 kilometers high.
Yeah.
Even being as large as it was, the Master of Light was much faster than any ship that would call itself its contemporary within the assembled fleet, even the battle barges of the Tempered Hands. Orion smiled, watching as, first the Navy, and then the Tempered Hands fleet themselves, gave chase, unwilling, one and all, to be unmanned. Good. This would keep them occupied, keep them busy, a new enemy to fall upon, to examine, to defeat. It was as good a diversion as any he could have ever hoped for, though paid for in much more blood than he would have ever desired. Meanwhile, the Skyward were even then executing his will, moving amongst the undefended carrier and cargo ships which held the vast majority of the survivors of the worlds they had evacuated, rich and poor, pauper and aristocrat. Some they were ordered to abduct, but most were to be slain, not obviously, but quickly, efficiently, and with as little immediate impact as possible. Their targets were pre-designated, chosen tactically by Orion himself after reviewing all of the known and possible data. His pristine, transhuman mind held all that he had ever seen and ever known at a thought's reach. And yet even then, he had deliberated greatly as to who was to go where on his list, and if they were to go on it at all. But the fact remained,
So he put together a purge
he needed
list.
to be able to come before the Lord Admiral and the Council of Tempered Minds, not only from a position of strength, but with compelling offers, and the power to carry out those offers. For this to
Makes
be the
sense.
case, some among the Martian priesthood would need to die, and others would need to be taken.
What are y'all yelling about? Stop. Alright. There's another dog outside. They've been very, very vocal. They know they're being filmed now.
For this to become reality, Many, many lords, aristocrats, bureaucrats, administrators, and governors
Be right back. Alright, they've calmed down.
would need to die. And not just them, but unfortunately, because of the very structures they had created, their entire bloodline as well.
Nice.
But this was ever the truth of the galaxy. Mankind needed to suffer so that mankind could survive. Orion had allotted for all the mercy he had felt he could afford, but he could never allow petty sentimentality to cloud his view of what needed to be done. As soon as this battle concluded, he would go to them, first the Lord Admiral and then the Council. And because they were here, and because he was here, they would have no way of knowing, anticipating, or suspecting what his offers would be. And that alone would be advantage enough, but it would not be his only advantage. Lord Admiral Rolla straightened her uniform, a habit which made her mentally wince. She bit down on the behavior, though the Admiral could barely fault herself for her unconscious nerves. She had spent almost an hour trying to determine what was appropriate to wear for this occasion. It was silly. She was well over 200 years old, and had waged battle against void spawn and alien menaces which would have made the Primarchs themselves shiver. She was the Lord Admiral, a veteran of crusades, defenses, retreats, and victories that would wither the souls of lesser humans, and yet even she found herself woefully underprepared for the request she had received shortly after the battle. A dinner invitation from a space marine.
Nice.
Forgive me, Lord Admiral, but doesn't that strike you as...
Odd?
said the head of her naval guard, who had insisted on accompanying her to the event in question, along with 13 of his men. Unprecedented, alarming, potentially lethal? She asked, still walking straight, facing forward with steel eyes. I was going to say unusual, Lord Admiral. She laughed humorlessly.
That is not a Lord Admiral. That is Amberly Vale.
You always were one for understatements. They said nothing else for a time as they traversed the distance between the transit station and the Rusted Trust, a sort of inn or lodge which existed somewhere in Habosis. The guards flanked them as they made their way down the wide metal avenues, boots clinking and clanking against the grates which made up the floors. Above them were not ceilings, but more grated floors, upward and downward, for hundreds of decks. And, all around them, the varied masses of the inhabitants of her flagship. Some scurried away from her and her retinue, hiding mutations or brandings which revealed them to be criminals. Others chanted prayers in their wake, rightly ascribing holy significance to the Lord Admiral of their sacred battle fleet.
That picture right there is of an Arbiter. And if you want to know what an Arbiter is, basically they're RoboCop without a conscience.
But most simply gawked, having never in their lives seen such high-ranking officers as the Lord Admiral and her bodyguards. Those among them with rank, the Voidsmen and Armsmen, saluted, bowed, or kneeled as they were passed, but they were not the majority. The rank odor of unwashed bodies, promethium, and stale air was ever present from the moment they had departed the transit station, and more, the Lord Admiral couldn't help but wonder why the chapter master of the Skywatch had asked to meet here, of all places. So, are you planning on discussing the next battle? Where we go to next? Alvad asked her, his voice coming not from his covered, helmed face, but from the subtle communications augmentation she had installed in the base of her neck. No, but probably, she responded, speaking through the implant without moving her lips. Ostensibly, this is an informal event. I even had the option to decline, she added. Ah, then why didn't you? He asked. She almost chortled at the very thought.
Yeah.
I am a Lord Admiral. He technically cannot order me to do anything without the permission of my superiors. Codex Astartes separation of powers and whatnot. He may have been in command of the retreat from Subsector Anjulin, but I don't think any of us are under any illusions when it comes to how legitimate his commands would be out here. That being said, I am not eager to earn the ire of a Space Marine chapter, the Skywatch least of all. I guess that explains why you're wearing your uniform to an informal event. So, you took it to be a subtle order, as opposed to an actual request. All that said, she nodded. But why? Like you said, he cannot order you, subtly or otherwise. What makes the Skywatch different from the Tempered Hands or even the Crimson Razors? The Lord Admiral Rolla shook her head in near disbelief. Captain, are you really unaware of the reputation of the Skywatch? She asked. Elvet shook his head before responding. Of course not. My homeworld was Yevon Secundus before the Navy. The Skywatch saved my planet from 2 insurrections and several greenskin incursions. We fly their banners in several places of honor. They are renowned, beloved, and we venerate those of us who were recruited by them during their visitations. And that's exactly my point, Rolla snapped through the comm. The Skywatch are control freaks. Maybe even more than their brothers back in Ultramar. They reform almost every world they quote-unquote rescue, always finding some cause or reason to uproot the existing aristocracy or nobility and replacing them with sycophants and supporters.
Pretty much.
Alvat shrugged. I don't know, Lord Admiral. High King Anu and his line have been good for my world. The famines almost don't come anymore, and when they do, stores normally hold up. The Imperial tithe is always paid, and the civvies are busy and happy more often than not. She rolled her eyes, but didn't bother to look at him. My point, Captain, is that he might try to do the same thing here, with me even. Again, Alvat shook his head. With respect, Lord Admiral, I think you're being too hard on them. They are loyal, through and through. I wouldn't doubt it for a second. The Lord Admiral sighed as she stopped and looked up at the patchy plascrete sign that adorned the large, round entrance into the rusted trust. I don't doubt their loyalty either, she said as she stepped forward and pressed the door chime to herald her arrival. The door hissed and squealed as it rolled open. It's who they're loyal to and how they manifest that loyalty that makes me nervous.
Outstanding. Let's see. Oh, yeah. True.
But the Emperor's...
Well, what's this?
Those heretics had claimed...
Okay, hold on a second.
Next time. Those heretics had claimed the Emperor was dead. They had claimed his light was vanished. And yet, what else could this be but the Emperor's own Aegis? What he saw instead of the haunted ruin of Cadia and its sister planets was interesting but unwelcomed. This confirmed his suspicions. They were no longer within the bounds of the Milky Way galaxy. He could almost feel its machine spirit stirring, waking from centuries of sleep in the hopes of doing once more what it had done so proudly before. I do not know who you are or why you are here, but Count Dooku would kill me if I... He got no further as several tendrils snapped out, surrounding the alien and enveloping him.
Say what? Alright. Well, leave it to the Ultramarines to pull this kind of nonsense. Leave it to a successor chapter of the Ultramarines in any case to pull this kind of nonsense. I know the next episode is about the Crimson Razors. I really can't wait to see that one because I think that's the successor chapter of the Black Templars. And if they got kicked out of the Black Templars for being too extreme, genocide's about to happen. In any case, hope you guys enjoyed the pugs. I know I did. I'll catch you guys next time.